Hey there and welcome to Photoshop 101. This is going to be an amazing course for anyone who's starting off in Photoshop, which I'm guessing is you. We're going to be covering quite a bit of things in this course. We're going to be breaking it up into sections. So each of the sections is going to talk about fundamental differences and primary areas of Photoshop itself. So this is the intro section, and we're going to be talking about basically introducing you to Photoshop, getting you a little bit familiar with the layout and everything like that, as well as some of the preferences and basically how to use Photoshop. This is just a general overview of everything, and then we're going to get more specific in part two. So let's go ahead and get into it. We'll start off. This is Photoshop CC, which has just been released just recently. You can see Photoshop CC. Now, this is the latest version of Photoshop. In July 18th, 2013 anyway. I'm not sure when you're watching this. This is very, very similar to previous versions of Photoshop. So if you guys are using Photoshop CS6, CS5, CS4, pretty much everything we cover is going to be very, very similar. So a lot of people will be curious to will this thing work with my program? And the answer is yes. Most of the techniques and the tools that I use have been available all the way since Photoshop CS2. So if you have a version of Photoshop that's been around in the last 3, 4, 5 years, pretty much everything we talk about is going to be very, very similar, if not just the exact same. So cool, getting you guys underway. And Photoshop CC is the latest version. Would I recommend upgrading? Sure, if you want to. It's almost no different from CS6. So if you want to just save your money and stick with CS6, then you can do that too. Okay, well, let's go ahead and talk about the intro. We're going to kind of talk about some of the things on how to use Photoshop, how to get the most out of the program. So we're just going to basically start up here with the Photoshop, and we're going to go into the preferences. So I would recommend doing this, the first time you start off Photoshop. Maybe, let's just click on that general there. I would recommend doing this the first time you start Photoshop. If you choose some of these preferences and then you hit a code, they're not going to apply until you close the program and then reopen it. So you can do this on your first time opening in Photoshop. But basically, we're going to be going through most of these, and then we're going to be moving on. Okay, so general, I would leave all this the same. Adobe Color Picker, sure. The HUD color strip, this is the only one I've ever used, and it works pretty well. And image interpolation, this is a pretty good one. This is how things get resized. There are a couple of options here that I leave most of these basically their default as it is. The only couple that I do change there are a couple with interface that I don't necessarily like opening tabs. I'll just kind of explain. So auto update, open documents, it rereads a document if it's updated outside of Photoshop, which is not going to happen most of the time. Yeah, these are pretty much all the same. Flick panning, this is one that I tend to turn off. It's basically if you have an iPad or a iPhone or something like that, and you click and you flick something with your finger, it just keeps going even after you let your finger go. They have that in Photoshop, and I find it annoying, so I uncheck that one. But that's everything else. I just pretty much leave the same. Okay, so this one you're not going to be doing a whole lot. Let's move on to our interface, and we can see you can change your color theme here. It's going to auto update in the background there. If you have an older version of Photoshop, it might look like this. I prefer the little bit darker. It's that was a big CS6 upgrade, very fancy. Okay, I also prefer to have a default, all of these as default, and I choose to have no border around my images. I just feel like it can basically get in the way of seeing the images exactly as I want. It'll also default to open documents as tabs. That's probably going to be defaulted checked. I personally don't really like using tabs in Photoshop. It's just not my style of how I like to organize everything. But if you do like using tabs, then by all means keep that checked. I do uncheck that as well. Okay, so everything else I pretty much keep the same as well. So nothing really big changes there. This isn't really that important. You can always come back and be like, oh, show tooltips. I want to see tooltips. That's if you hover over a tool, it might not do it because I'm in this interface, but it might say this is the brush tool or whatever. All right, sync settings. This is going to be with Adobe CC. If you don't have Adobe CC, you won't see this. And again, I'm not even using any of this parts stuff. I haven't really played around with all the syncing stuff with Adobe CC yet because it's kind of useless to me. But It's fun that they added that. Why not? All right. Let's get into file handling. All this pretty much I leave the same as well. This is a really nice option down here. Save in background. Let's say you're working on a file and you're 20 minutes into it and something happens through the computer and it crashes and you lose all your information. That can ruin your day. So I always like to keep the save in background clicked, and I have it save every 10 minutes. Now, the only downside of that is that it's going to pretty much take up your system resources while it's saving. So if you are working on a computer that is not very robust, you might want to maybe make this every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes, or just turn it off in general and save yourself. You might be working on a file and notice Photoshop suddenly slows down quite a bit, and it's probably because you have this checked. Now, if you guys are on a robust computer, and I'll define what I mean as a robust computer shortly, you won't have that problem at all. Okay, file compatibility, I would just say keep all these checked exactly how they are. Okay, very cool. And then let's go on to performance. This is something that more people are going to be interested in. We got a spinning wheel of death. It's like, I don't want to perform very well. This is very funny, actually. There we go. I'm not sure. Maybe it had to just figure out what hard drives I had connected right now. Okay, so performance. This is where you can get a lot out of Photoshop. Now, a lot of people ask, like, what's the best way to speed up performance? And through experience, I find that RAM is a really big one. Having a lot of RAM in your computer is going to really help your computer just crank through Photoshop. Having a recently good processor is a good thing as well, but having a lot of RAM is going to really help out. So the machine that I use, it's the one you're seeing right now. It's let's just go up to Apple here and go down to about this Mac. There we go. I am on the latest version of the OS X. It's a brand new 27-inch iMac with it's basically just everything that Max. So it's a 3.4 gigahertz Core i7 with 32 gigabytes of RAM. The RAM I don't order from Apple. You can save quite a bit of money by getting it aftermarket. There are a lot of aftermarket sites. Newegg.com is a great one. You can get great RAM. Just don't get the cheapest RAM because it might kind of like not be that great. So, get something there in like the mid-range. Make sure it's got a lot of positive reviews. But 32 gigabytes of RAM from Apple is quite expensive. 32 gigabytes of RAM. I think I paid $200 to get 32 gigs, so it's not really that bad. Is this feasible for everyone? No, it's not. I mean, I realize 100% that my job is to do Photoshop and to teach Photoshop, and I'm in Photoshop 3 or 4 hours every single day. So for me to get a computer that can run Photoshop well it's a part of my job. I don't expect everyone to be able to have these things, but if you are running a slightly older machine, look at upgrading your RAM. That's going to really help out and make Photoshop run a little bit faster. Okay. Sorry, I wasn't trying to brag about my computer there. I was just maybe someone found that to be cool or knowledgeable. All right, so now not knowledgeable. Maybe someone found that knowledge useful. That's what I wanted to say. Okay, so we have an available RAM, 30 gigabytes here. And I've got Photoshop using 27 gigabytes of my RAM, which is 90%. Now, if you guys are using less RAM, if you have less RAM, I would probably bring this down a little bit smaller. Now, I'm okay giving it 90%. And the reason is that gives me 3 gigabytes of RAM for other programs like, my internet browser or, Twitter or whatever. And 3 gigabytes of RAM is more than enough for all that other stuff. So that's, I'm totally okay allowing Photoshop to use a lot of RAM. And what that means is that it's going to run as fast as it possibly can until it runs out of RAM. And at 32 gigs, you don't run out of RAM often. I'm going to go up here to my Finder. By the way, I do work on a Mac computer. I had a PC a few years ago. I haven't been on a PC in probably 4 or 5 years. So I'm a lot more familiar with Mac. I know some of you guys are going to be on computers or PC computers, but I'm guessing a lot of these things will be relatively similar. Okay, I'm going to go up here and just type in Activity Monitor. And this is a great way to keep track of your actual activity, like what's going on with your computer. I have this thing up quite a bit of the time, and you can check out your CPU usage and system memory. This is something I keep up quite a bit. So we have our Photoshop basically It's taking up 293 megabytes of RAM. Like that's not that much. As we open images and we start using more and more RAM, this number will decrease. So we can see we still have 26 gigabytes of RAM free. Photoshop will take up a lot of this RAM, so we'll bring this up later. Okay, there we go. So basically, I recommend keeping this number as high as possible. Another thing you can do to make sure that Photoshop is going to speed up, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the future, I would recommend closing out all of your programs. If you have Lightroom open, if you have Aperture open, if you have any program that's going to take up a bit of memory, I would recommend closing those down. If you're about to spend some decent time in Photoshop, it's going to really make Photoshop faster, especially Lightroom. Lightroom is a big memory hog, and so I really recommend closing that down. The next thing I would recommend doing, if you are on a Mac, and I don't know how to do this on a PC, I apologize, but I think it's possible if you do a quick Google search. If you're on a Mac, type in terminal into your spotlight there and bring up your terminal. And if you have been using your computer, let's say you've been using your computer for 20 or 30 minutes or a few days or whatever it is, and all of your RAM, you'll notice that your RAM tends to get logged, and Photoshop will run slowly even if there aren't any other programs. Computers tie your RAM up in other programs, like making it available for like quick use. A quick way you can get rid of all of that is to purge your RAM. I know this sounds scary, but all you have to do is type into terminal and then just type in the letter purge, type in the word purge and hit it, and it's going to purge your RAM. And basically what this means is like any RAM that has been allocated for quick use for another program is just going to go back to free. So we'll do this a couple times during this Photoshop 101, and you'll see just by opening terminal and typing in purge, your computer is going to run twice as fast. No matter if you're using Photoshop or whatever, this is just part of your computer. It will run twice as fast. It's pretty amazing. When I found out about that, it changed my mind. My life. Changed my mind. The next thing you have an option is whether you're editing in 8-bit and 16-bit. Now, this is not a course. This is not an episode on 8-bit versus 16-bit. If you guys go to Phlearn.com and type in 8-bit versus 16-bit, we have episodes on that. But I would recommend for most cases, 90% of the time, 8-bit is going to be just fine. I would say that I would really only work on 16-bit when I knew I was going to edit an image like very, very heavily, and it was a very important image for a client who was paying you good money. So almost all the rest of the time I would work on an image in 8-bit, and that's what I work on in my images here. The reason is 8-bit images are much more friendly when it comes to system resources on your computer, so they're just going to help you use your computer run a little bit faster. So those are some quick tips to help Photoshop get to be running quite a bit faster. All right. The next thing we're going to look at, this is all great here. You can change your history states. You know, when you hit the undo button, like here in your history, you can actually increase that number up as high as you'd like. I keep it relatively low right here, about 20. And the reason is the higher this number goes, the more that has to be stored in the memory. So the higher the number goes, the slower your computer is going to run. I tend to use layers instead of undo. Like I'll just create a new layer if I want to do something. So I keep this about 20. Now, scratch disk, this is another important place on how to get your computer to run a little bit faster. I have a Promise Pegasus, which is like a RAID drive. It's a Thunderbolt RAID array, and it is incredibly amazing in every way. It's incredibly expensive too. This thing was not cheap. I don't remember how much I paid for it, but it was not inexpensive. But it is very, very fast. So using Thunderbolt as a connection, I have the R4, which is 4 drives rated together. And so if I do run out of RAM, your computer can use actual memory as what's called like a scratch disk. It's like something similar to RAM. And this is nice because it just tells you what everything's doing right down below. Thanks, Adobe. You're basically doing my job for me. It's really great. So I would recommend, you can change the order of things. If you do have like an external Thunderbolt drive or a solid state drive or something like that, you can use that as a scratch disk, and things are going to go much faster. So that's my first scratch disk. It's got plenty of space. And then the next one is my Microsoft, sorry, not my Microsoft, my Macintosh hard drive that's in my computer itself. And these are just backup, and I've got one for my movies and things like that. So I don't check those because I don't want those to be scratch disks. And then I do have this use as a graphics processor. Basically, you can use Photoshop can use your GPU to increase performance. So I do have that checked as well. It tells you on the bottom where it helps out and things like that, especially with 3D, which I don't do, and we're not going to be covering in this because this is Photoshop 101, and 3D in Photoshop is definitely not 101. Okay, cursors, I leave these the same as well. Transparency and gamut, don't mess with that. Every now and then, rulers on your images you can change to like pixels or inches. I usually just keep it at inches because I don't use them that much. Yep, and then you know what? Everything down from here, I always just leave the exact same. And again, 3D, not going to cover it today. All right, cool. So that's cool. We're going to hit OK. And if you did make a bunch of changes, they're not going to apply until you quit Photoshop and then open Photoshop again. So just make sure that you do quit Photoshop and then open Photoshop again. Okay, the next thing I want to go over is how to get a little bit faster in Photoshop. So we went over speeding Photoshop itself, but the next thing we're going to go over is we're going to go to Edit, and I'm going to go all the way down here to keyboard shortcuts. And a lot of people have questions about keyboard shortcuts, and the best way, I've seen tons of like keyboard shortcut lists, and we even have them on Flearn. But the best thing to do really is just to go here in Photoshop because they're already here. You don't have to like find them or anything. So go to Edit, down to keyboard shortcut. You can even change your menus. You can make custom menus, which is right up here. So let's go to our keyboard shortcuts, and I'll just show you really quickly how to do this sort of thing, and then you can create your own keyboard shortcuts in Photoshop, which is going to allow you to work a lot faster. If something makes sense to you, you're like, if you want to make a mask and you want to hit Command M to make that mask, and it's instead like some other weird thing, you can be like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to change it to be Command M. Okay, so we have like basically all of our menu items up here in the keyboard shortcut. So Photoshop preferences general is Command K. So if you wanted to open up your preferences, you could hit Command K. So we can see everything that's actually in here. Let's just go to, Photoshop, hide Photoshop, Control Option H. Let's close that down. We'll go to File, and then we'll just start with something like Command N for new. That's going to be a new document. Command O is going to be for open. Let's just click here and say, you know what? I don't like Command O. I want to make this something else. Maybe Shift Command O. All you have to do is click right here and hold down your keys. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, hold down the Command key, and I'm going to hit O. Okay, so now it's changed to Shift Command O, and we get a little warning size. It says Shift Command O is already in use, and it's going to be removed from Browse in Bridge if accepted. And basically, I've never used Browse in Bridge, so if I really did want to do that, I would just go to Accept and go to Conflict. Instead, I like Open being Command O, and I don't use this one, and I don't want it to be Shift Command O, so I'm going to hit Undo Changes. But if you did want something to change, you can just change it yourself, which is very, very nice. Some of the more commonly used ones that I do use, things like blurs. I use blurs quite a bit. So if we go to Filter, and then down here to Blur, there we go, and we have Gaussian blur. Now you're not going to have this on your computer because I've created it myself. So Gaussian blur I use all the time. I use it every time I'm in Photoshop. So I'm going to click here and just select that, Shift Option Command G. You type that in, and then that's going to now be the keyboard shortcut for a Gaussian blur, which is very, very cool. Another one that's pretty good, and we'll get into this sort of thing later. I realize this is the 101, but you guys have probably already watched Flearn, and you probably already have seen me use a Gaussian blur. Another one that I use for sharpening and things like that is the high pass filter, which does not have a keyboard shortcut by default. So we can go to Filter, down here, all the way down to Other, and then here high pass. And you can see I've hit Option Shift Command H. So if I hit Option Shift Command H, I will get a high pass on my layer, which is really nice for sharpening. So you can just create your own keyboard shortcuts. You don't have to follow lists. Just do it yourself, and that's a great way to do it. So a great way to get fast in Photoshop is to use your keyboard shortcuts. You can also change around your menus. To be honest, I just leave these pretty much exactly how they are already. If you really wanted to, menu for application menus, you can create new menus, by the way, if you'd like to do that. I don't know what this button is. I'm just create a new set based on current set of menus. That's how you do that, basically. A new set. If you wanted to create a new set and you just call this like no 3D, let's hit enter. Okay, so we have our no 3D menu, and here in our application menus, we're just gonna like get rid of this. I think we can just get rid of this. Are you sure you want to send no 3D? No, I don't want to do that. Okay, it's obvious to turn off. It's obvious that I really have not done this ever. Okay, well, I guess you could just turn off the visibility here, but I don't know if you can get rid of the entire menu. Let's just see. I don't think any of you guys are going to be doing this, so, you know, this is more just like a test to, let's see what kind of cool stuff we can do in Photoshop. All right, let's say, okay. I mean, now in 3D, I've removed all that stuff. And if I want to show it all, I can show it all again. Cool. If I want to change my menu, I'll just go up to my keyboard shortcuts again, and we'll go back to Photoshop defaults because I'm happy with that. And I don't need to save the other one. Okay, we're going to hit OK, and we're good to go. So if you did want to, let's say you go to layer and you're like, you know what, I never do copy CCS, and I don't ever do this thing. I want them gone. That's how you would get them gone. But personally, I don't do that. So you can do whatever it is that you'd like. Okay, well, we're going to be go ahead and next thing we're going to talk about is our color space. So this is all just like general things like that. We haven't even opened an image and we're 21 minutes into it, but I hope this is helping it out. The next thing we're going to talk about is color spaces, and this is actually pretty important. So to go to your color spaces, go to edit, and then down to color settings here. Okay, if you guys are first working in Photoshop, I would recommend getting this set up as soon as you possibly can. Now, there are a lot of schools of thought when it comes to what RGB you should be working in, or what your working space should be in. This is really the most important thing to click on right here. If it defaults to sRGB, which I believe that it either defaults to sRGB or Adobe 1998, I would definitely not work in sRGB, by the way. The reason is sRGB is a smaller color spectrum. And what I mean by color spectrum is just like amount of colors that are available. sRGB is a color profile that is made to display well on the internet. So it's not going to display the full range of colors. They take quite a few colors out so it can just display well on the internet. Now, if you guys are making prints, why would you want to limit yourself to just the colors that would display on the internet? The answer is that you would not. So a great option is Adobe RGB 1998, and most people choose this option. A few years ago, I read a great article on, I believe it was the Luminous Landscape, which is a really great blog, on why ProPhoto RGB actually includes more colors than anything else in the spectrum. So if you do want just to make sure you have the maximum fidelity, that's like the difference between shooting JPEG and RAW. This is like not a lot of information, a lot more. So I can't tell you all of the reasons why I choose ProPhoto RGB because I made up my mind 2 years ago and I haven't thought about it since, which is how I do most of my things in life. I'm like, okay, I read an article, they convinced me that this was the best, and now we'll just do that so I don't have to mess with it. But I would stick with ProPhoto RGB. This is my good one. If you guys are happy with using something like Adobe, go for it. Just do not choose sRGB, please. And you're going to be a lot better there. Now, the next most important thing to do, if you're going to be using ProPhoto RGB, make sure you go down here and check all these buttons here. Ask when opening, ask when pasting, and ask with open. Like, make sure you have all those checked. Because if you don't check these, what it's going to do is if you try to open an image that was created in sRGB, if you try to open it now in your workspace, which is a ProPhoto RGB, well then, what's going to happen is basically your colors are going to be completely wrong. So you want to make sure that that's all checked correctly. All right, so we're going to hit OK, and I'll show you guys in just 1 second. Let's hit OK there. How to make sure you guys you guys, how to make sure. I'm turning into Chicago, and look at that. I moved from North Carolina to Chicago about 2 years ago. Now I'm saying use guys. All right, we're gonna just make sure that you're, gonna work with your color settings correctly all the way through. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Lightroom. We're not gonna do a whole lot with Lightroom today. This is not a Lightroom tutorial, but I do use Lightroom quite a bit, and this is just a great way to organize your files and everything like that. So this is the image we're going to be working on today. This is Lauren. We photographed her in the Chicago Botanical Gardens a couple of weeks ago. Great photo, and basically it's shot in RAW, so this is DNG. If you want to basically get this into Photoshop, what I usually do, I'll right click on this file and go up to export and over here to export. You can create presets, but basically let's just say we create a selects preset, okay? Where we have a it's going to export it as a TIFF in 8 bits. This is how I work. I work in 8-bit TIFFs. This is never in JPEG. You want it in TIFF because it's a lot more information, okay? And I choose the actual color space that I'm going to work on in Photoshop. So it's consistent all the way through. So I've imported my image as a DNG file, and then we've gone to export it out as a TIFF, ProPhoto RGB at 8 bits per component. And let's just hit export here. And then it's going to ask me, where do I want to put this? And I'll just put it right here. So I'm going to include both the DNG and the TIFF for you guys if you'd like that. Oh, and apparently I had selected 2 files, so we'll just have to delete one of those out. Not a big deal though. All right. That's all we're going to learn in Lightroom today. Matching your color settings. And let's just quit that out. But I hope that was pretty helpful. So basically what we have now is similar color spaces exported out from Lightroom, so from RAW in the camera. Lightroom sets us up for ProPhoto RGB, and then here in Photoshop we've got ProPhoto RGB, and that's how I would recommend setting up your color spaces. Now when you're saving for the internet, remember sRGB is great for saving for the internet. Let's just open that file. I'm going to hit Command O, and we're going to just find our file here. There we go. That TIFF, we're just going to hit enter and open this file here. Now, this is in ProPhoto RGB. It's a TIFF, it's 8-bit. We already know that because that's how it came out of Lightroom. Now, if you are saving this for the web, this is the time in which you actually do want to change your color space. And the reason is, so you want to work with something like at its, most capable source. You'd be printing off of this file and everything like that. But when you're saving it for the web, then it's time to go to the color space that's best for the web, which is sRGB. And this is just the same thing as you take a picture with your camera in RAW and you get the most information, and then you edit it, and then you export it out, 400 pixels wide or whatever for the internet, or 600 pixels, whatever nowadays. Same sort of thing with color space. So when you're saving this out, what I would recommend doing is go to File and then go to Save for Web. Okay? Shift Option Command S is the keyboard shortcut there. And here, you're always going to have this option for Convert to sRGB. And I do recommend keeping that checked, because what it's going to do is when it saves it out, it's going to convert it to sRGB color space, and then it's going to be perfect for the web. So a lot of people have asked, oh, I've worked on my images and they were so beautiful and so perfect in Photoshop. Then I uploaded them on the internet and the colors are all wrong and I hate my life. Just make sure you just go to Save for Web and sRGB, and you'll never have that problem again. There we go. Some of you are like, oh my God, I'm so happy right now. And I'm happy to make you happy. Okay, let's go ahead and close this out because we are going to talk about using Adobe Camera Raw just for a second, because I don't really use it, but we are going to cover it because this is Photoshop 101. So we're going to hit Command W, which will close a document. And now I'm going to hit Command O again, which is going to open it. And we're going to click on this DNG and hit Enter. DNG stands for Digital Negative. This is Adobe's version of a RAW file. Okay, so this is, when you open a RAW file in Photoshop, this comes up, Camera Raw. Now this 8.1, that's just because I'm using CC, you might have version 7 or whatever. It's not that big of a deal. Now, this is the same, it's not the same window, but Camera Raw uses mathematical formulas, algorithms, whatever you want to call it. I am not a developer, but the engine that runs Adobe Camera Raw is the exact same engine that runs Lightroom, okay? So Lightroom and Camera Raw both use the exact same thing. They're different Camera Raw is available here within Photoshop, and it allows you to open a raw file in Photoshop. I do everything through Lightroom. If you don't have Lightroom, not a big deal. You can still open raw files here in Photoshop. Now, if you went to open the DNG file that I provided and it said something like, you need to update Adobe Camera Raw, well, I would recommend updating Adobe Camera Raw. You can get to that by going up to, well, let's just hit cancel. It should just give you a link, by the way, but you could do this and then I think help, and then you could just like update. Yeah, you can click on updates and you can Adobe Camera Raw. All right, let's try to reopen that. So I'm gonna hit Command O and I'm gonna hit enter there. Okay, so this is Adobe Camera Raw. This is very similar to Lightroom. You can see, you know, things like being able to adjust your exposure here, adjust your contrast. Like a lot of these things are available in Lightroom. Let's bring our highlights down a little bit. Maybe our shadows up a little bit. A little shadow detail in there. Never hurt anyone. Let's make our blacks a little bit lighter. There we go. Pull our contrast. Cool. We're making this image better. Look at this. We are just adjusting the fun out of this. Vibrance, let's turn that. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. I'm gonna make this like, ooh. No, we're not gonna make this super vibrant. It would start to look weird on our skin, but we can make our trees vibrant. We could just do that in Photoshop, because I'm actually gonna teach you how to do some stuff too. Okay, so you can play around with all that sort of stuff. This is, you know, in Lightroom, like you have all these other options. This is about all I would do in Camera Raw or in Lightroom is you know, working with your color tint. Like if you have a tint that's a little off or something like that, usually you won't have to mess with tint. Adjust your color temperature and adjust your exposure and things like that. That's about all I would do with Lightroom or in Camera Raw, because this is editing in 16-bit. Right now this mode is in 16-bit. As soon as I bring it into Photoshop, I want it to only be 8-bit though. You know, I don't want to edit in 16-bit, but I was able to recover information in the highlights here in 16-bit. So we're going to go ahead and basically say, okay, now I'm ready for Photoshop. And you can click here. It's going to try to open it as Adobe RGB because I haven't changed this yet. Let's go to Pro Photo. 8 bits per channel. That looks pretty good. We'll hit OK. So it's going to go Pro Photo RGB, 8 bits. This is our size, 21 megapixels, 300 pixels per inch. So there we go. Basically got the same settings that was going on with Lightroom. So this is a one or another. You don't have to use Camera Raw. You can use Lightroom if you want. But if you do want to use a Camera Raw, that's how you do it. And then you're going to hit Open Image. It's going to convert it. It's going to use that raw converter, and it's going to open it here in Photoshop. So we can see now we have an 8-bit image, and the color settings are Pro Photo RGB. So using both programs to basically, you know, do the exact same thing, which is really great. Okay, so opening and working with documents. We've already shown you guys how to open this. Now I'm going to open a document. Let's just hit Command O. Let's go on my desktop and pull in a bio picture that I use quite a bit. Here we go. We'll hit open now. Now, here's what we're going to get. If you do not see this, it means when we went to edit, and we remember we went to color settings and I checked those 3 boxes, this is why it's important, okay? Because it's saying, hey, missing profile. There's not an RGB profile in here. If you say leave as is, it's just going to like do whatever it wants. If you assign the working Pro Photo RGB, it's going to basically assume that the image already is a Pro Photo RGB, which is not, because it was saved for the web. So the best way to do it usually is to assign this profile, okay? It's basically saying, hey, I think it's an sRGB, okay? So we're going to go ahead and say that it is one, and then while you're opening it, let's go ahead and convert it to the working RGB so the colors are going to be right. So let's hit OK, and there we go. Colors should be good. And we've just opened a picture of a handsome man. Let's open another where it's just not like totally weird. Okay, here we go. We've got a giant ego. There we go. So you could actually probably tell what colors. If I hit just assign, whoa, look at that. My colors look horrible, right? They look horrible because I just said, hey, just assign it the current working space. And the reason is because this is not the color profile of this image. So we're going to have to close that. Command W. Command O to open it. I just had this on my desktop. All right, and now let's go ahead and say, you know what, because this had been saved out for the web, let's do that, and now it should look exactly as it's supposed to look. So if you don't have those boxes checked right here for your color settings, it's going to default on just opening it as the current color profile, and it's going to be whack. So make sure you check those boxes, and then you can actually like do what you want to do. All right, let's just close those out again by hitting Command W. Okay, so we've gone over opening documents, and we're gonna just cover that a little bit more because there are a couple more ways to open documents. So we've hit Command O a couple times. So that's the same thing as going to File and down to Open. I use keyboard shortcuts quite a bit. Now the next thing that I would recommend doing if you want to open up a number of images is go to File, go down here to Scripts, and then go to Load Files into Stack. Okay, load files into Stack. You can hit this browser. What this is going to do is basically choose a bunch of different images, and it's going to load them all together for you, okay? So we're going to hit this browse button, and let's just go back to our, there we go, and tutorial images. We're just going to command click on right of both of these. This is one that I exported out accidentally. Remember in Lightroom, I exported this out accidentally. We'll just leave it in there, why not? So I'm going to command click on the both of those. This is a great example of, hey, you know what? Not all the pictures that Aaron takes are good. We're going to command click on those, and I'm going to hit open. It's going to load these here. Okay, we can have it automatically align the source images. That's if they were all taken like on a tripod in the same place. We're not going to check that right now because that's not the case. And we're going to hit open. There we go. So it's going to just put both of the images in the same stack. And this is really helpful if you want to, like, you know, bring in multiple variations and, you know, kind of test them on one another at the same time. So you don't have to like open up 10 things and then transfer per document and things like that. So very, very helpful if you just want to open up a bunch of documents at the same time. Let's just bring that forward. So that's how to open a document, okay? And then how to use a script to load the files into a stack. Now, if you do have a couple documents over and you want to transfer what's going on from this to this document to this other document, I don't recommend using copy and paste because that puts quite a bit of information on your clipboard, which will slow your computer down. Instead, just grab your move tool, which is this guy right up here. We're going to get to these in the next section. You can also hit V for your move tool, and then just click and drag from one to the other. And there we go. Now I'm on this one. And if you want to delete that layer, just hit the delete key and it will go away. So that's moving from one to another. All right. The next cool thing that we have is you can copy and paste. Like if you want to just select out this area and hit Command C on this layer, you can hit Command V and it'll paste. Now let's say you copy an image off the internet or something like that, and then you want it to open it in Photoshop, like you are just going to use it as a reference file or whatever. So right click on your image on the internet and go to copy image, whatever. So that's Command C. If you want to open it up as a new document, just hit Command N, which will open up as a new document. Hit OK, and then Command V. Now you'll notice that it will create a new document the exact size of whatever is on your clipboard, which is very cool. So it opened up a new document that is the same exact size as what was on my clipboard. And in this case, I just pasted it back in, and there we go. So you don't have to adjust your size afterwards. All right, let's hit Command W to close that, and we're going to close this one out as well because we don't need to save that as well. We're just moving along. All right, we got two purge RAM. All right, we are actually done. I got a big checklist here of all the things that I wanted to cover with. The last two were prepping files in Lightroom. And oh, the next thing that we have is Bridge, which is, to be honest, I don't even know where it is. God, I never, ever use Bridge. I don't think there's anything wrong with Bridge, and it's browse in Bridge. Okay. Update, I guess. Oh God, this is gonna take forever. Okay, Bridge is like the simplified version of Lightroom, and it's simplified in many ways, and in many ways it's just not as good. To be honest, I don't use it at all, ever. So some of you guys might swear by Bridge, and that's totally cool. It's just not something that I use. So me teaching you Bridge is just going to be really silly because I've literally never used it. But it is available for you as a part of Photoshop. You can see, oh, you guys get to see my password here. Not. I don't even know what it's doing right now. It's basically saying like, why have you never used Bridge? Basically, Bridge is like a stripped down version of Lightroom where you can, browse through your files and you can do minor adjustments and things like that. And it is included within Photoshop. I prefer to just use Lightroom and do what I need to, and then export out into Photoshop from there. All right. So this is just gonna update, and then hopefully we can actually open Bridge. I don't know. I'm sorry you had to go through this because I'm just like, Okay, cool. Well, there's the Creative Cloud for you. If you guys want to experience how cool Creative Cloud is, then now you can. It's just like anytime you want to open something, it has to download it. And so far, I'm not the biggest Creative Cloud fan, but whatever. All right. Well, maybe when this decides to work, we can go back and talk about Bridge in section 2, because I'm not going to have you guys wait for that. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to cover just one more time is let's open up our activity monitor here. And we can see this is the amount of RAM we're using. Let's open up Terminal again, and I'll just show you this purge again, because it's very, very helpful. PURGE, hit enter. You can see that amount of RAM that we were just using in Photoshop just got deleted. So Photoshop doesn't affect the program at all. We just cleared up our memory again, which is like, wow. That's very, very nice. All right, guys, and that is the end of the introduction. The next section is going to be on the tools, and we're going to be covering basically everything that we have right over here. Thanks for sticking around for this introduction. I hope you guys learned a ton, had a good time. Sorry about the Bridge thing and the Photoshop CC, but now you can have a reason to just stick with CS6. I'll see you in section 2. Bye, guys.